ex-Watford and goalkeeper, which is a huge honour for me, by the way, because I am a big lifelong Watford fan, just to let you know.
Oh, really?
Straight into it, with the amount of years you spent at Watford, what did it mean to you to play for Watford?
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, there's I say reasonably local. So I grew up in Aylesbury. So Watford was effectively always my local club and a club that I follow closely. And yeah, so I joined Watford when I was 10, 11 years old. So that idea of actually playing for the first team for many, many years, you're always thinking, what will it be like to actually step on the field? And I remember when I was younger, I used to go to a lot of the youth cup games. I remember once, I was 14, 15, they're playing against Man United, and you sort of see these young players playing on the pitch and obviously getting to more and more of the first team games. So yeah, to eventually make my debut and play as many games as I did for them, it's phenomenal. And yeah, even now it's obviously nice. I built some friendships that have lasted the test of time. So yeah, very lucky.
Yeah, I'm aware you keep a close eye on still Brentford and Watford. What do you think was some of the reasons behind Watford's relegation last year?
Yeah, I mean, look, the one that I think everybody looks at, and I've probably got a similar opinion to a lot of fans now, because I don't necessarily have the inside knowledge that maybe I had a few years ago, and obviously a lot's changed at the club. A lot of positive things, it has to be said, but also the club's changed completely. Where it was with Graham Taylor and a few of the managers thereafter, a real sort of tight-knit family club. I get the impression that the feeling has changed a bit. And maybe it had to, with the way in which football's gone. But yeah, the obvious statement is the fact that there was so much chaos, so much turbulence. It just seemed like, you just felt, or you wanted there to be a bit more stability. And in the end, really, the squad was, it was such a good squad. You shouldn't have gone down, but of course, it's the old cliche, isn't it, that you're never too good to go down. And unfortunately, in the end, it was close run, but I do think that the amount of chaos and the amount that they change managers, naturally, that's not going to have a positive effect long term.
Yeah, I think as a fan last season, for my personal opinion, there was a lot I didn't agree with. I mean, I remember very clearly the West Ham away game. We lost 3-1, 3-0 down within 25 minutes and some subs. I mean, there was a lot of games last season where there was just subs I didn't really understand from Pearson or even, there was talks about Giraldi making him make the subs, telling him what to do. But yeah, I think for a Watford fan, I don't know, after 3-0 against Liverpool, we was on a high. We all thought, yeah, we can do this. We can stay up. I don't really know what happened after. I went to the Liverpool game. Then the week after, I went to Crystal Palace away when we lost 1-0. Then, of course, COVID happened, so there was that big delay in the season. So, for me personally, as a fan, I think a lot did change with Watford last season. I mean, there was the whole thing with the, Quique Sanchez-Flores, Javi Gracia, Nigel Pearson, and it was just a big. I don't think the change of managers. I mean, Nigel Pearson came in, he did step up a little bit, but when we sacked him 2 games ago, I didn't really understand that. What was your opinion when they got rid of Nigel 2 games before the season ended?
Yeah. Well, look, similar to you, I went to some of the games I went to, and you kind of felt it mental. How many times in a season would you beat Liverpool and Man United and get relegated? Yeah. Just doesn't happen. Which kind of makes the point is that the players weren't good enough, and I think that was obviously the biggest frustration. I didn't understand the timing of removing Pearson. Obviously, I appreciate it probably wasn't perfect. I get that, but I think when you do look at the amount of points he accumulated during the time he was there, of course, obvious thing. But had he been there the whole season and kept that average, the team would have done very well, because they were, as much as they maybe weren't on the best run of form. You mentioned the West Ham game, and that was obviously a hammer blow. You felt like they'd have. Look, it's easy to say now because it's done, but at the time you felt like, would that have had the impact making the change they did? I don't know what they were expecting. I guess what kind of bounce they were expecting. So, look, again, it's easy to kind of sit here, and I was actually asked a lot at the time about this, and like I say, essentially now I am looking at it as a fan, because I don't have the insight that perhaps I once did. But as a fan, you kind of felt like, what is the thinking here? Like, is this then going to give the lads a boost? I know if I was a player at that time, I don't think that would have necessarily motivated me. And that's no disrespect to Hayden Mullins or Graham Stack, who I know are fantastic. But it was just the fact that, is that going to then galvanise a group with a couple of games to go? And obviously it didn't, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I actually spoke to some Watford fans. A few Watford fans knew you was coming on today. And a lot of them were saying, and I don't know if you would agree or not, that's what I'm going to ask you, is either your game at Manchester City or at Southampton was your best performances in a Watford top. Would you agree, or do you have a different game?
Yeah, I guess they would be. Like, I look back, and it's funny when you look back and you go over, get certain games stick in the memory, good and bad. Like, there's a few bad ones that stick in the memory, but certainly good. It would have been the best time was actually my first ever season. I look back at my first ever proper season. So I broke through, I had a few games, and then I was injured for a season. And then the following season, I played like 30 odd games, and that was probably my best time when we were. And I felt like I was young, I felt fit, strong, and just felt like I was really, really flying. That would have been my best time, I think. And then I broke my cheek that season. It was the season that Eddie Boothroyd came in. But then, the Premier League season, when I came back from Blackburn, to get to play in some of the games we played, and beating Middlesbrough at home. And you mentioned the Man City game, playing at St James's Park, playing at Old Trafford. It was phenomenal, when I look back. And the Southampton game was mental, really. And actually, it was a funny game because I gave away a bad penalty from memory, but then obviously saved the penalty, saved another penalty, and we ended up going and winning the game. So it was, and at the time, I wouldn't say, look, when I look back, it was, I went there, then we played Cardiff at home, I think it was, and I had another brilliant game, but I didn't feel great at that time. I remember at the time I was injured and I didn't feel great, but suddenly everything was just going my way. But then unfortunately I had a bit of a bad run after that, and actually that was pretty much the end of my time there, because I had a bit of a bad run, and I think Scott Loach came in to replace me and could never win my place back. But real roller coaster when I look back. Loads and loads of highs, a couple of tough moments. But no, I mean, generally, I was there for 17 years. I still live a mile from the ground. I'm very much, and it's still the first result I look for every weekend.
I mean, in my lifetime, the only two keepers to save 2 penalties for Watford is you and Aurelio Gomez against West Brom. So it's still a pretty big deal, to be fair.
Yeah. No, I'd happily keep that company. He's fantastic goalkeeper, he is.
You mentioned some bad games also live in the memory. Do any what come to mind for you, like in terms of a bad game for you or for the team?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one for me, and I've said it before, but it's we played Hull City in the playoff semi-final, and it was just the fact that it was just frustrating. I remember sitting on the coach afterwards, and I played 40 odd games that season, and I think I was like in the running for Player of the Year, and had a really, really good season. For it to finish in such a negative way, and it was then just everything that happened thereafter, because it felt like we'd gone Premier League to the Championship, we wanted to bounce back, didn't quite happen, and you could sort of see things unraveling. And I know at the time, like, I felt really guilty. And felt like, it just felt like I'd let everyone down. And this is a strange thing where it's, you go out and you give absolutely everything and you dedicate your life to something. And I remember that time, it's probably the biggest low I had, not just in football, but in general, because it was the feeling of, like I've really let everyone down. And I didn't, obviously I gave everything I could. I made a bad decision, cost us a goal. And that's where it becomes more than football, because then it did for months. I struggled to kind of get to grips and come to terms with that. So that was by far the biggest low point I've had, certainly at Watford, but certainly in football, I'd say. Then there was other games. There was individual moments, you look back, and I think where I was quite lucky was where I did made some mistakes. I don't think I made many mistakes. I think that was probably my biggest strength as a goalkeeper in general. The most goals I ever conceded in a game was 4, which is not that many really, and that was Man United a couple of times. I think QPR or something. So I was quite consistent in that way. I didn't make many errors, and I was always quite lucky. I think the low points I had individually, I tended to bounce back quite quickly. But certainly that whole City moment, horrendous, and like I said, it took me a long time to get over that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, playing-wise, I never was or would be ever good enough to be a professional footballer. Literally never. But I did play 2 seasons in Sunday League in goal. I was absolutely dreadful. Most of my games, when you talk about thinking about a bad game, literally most of my games, I remember a game we was 4-0 down at half-time, and then we had a player called Jack, and he was like, we can do what they just done. And then my team scored 4 goals, and it was 4-0, and I was like, okay. And I remember the 90th minute, easiest cross you will ever see came in. I missed the ball. They tapped it in, and everyone, my whole team, were just looking at me like in such disgust. I was like, "Oh my god!" Yeah. So I don't play football anymore.
No, it's horrible. But this sense of what I've ended up doing now, and I've gone down the route of. But this is it, because as a goalkeeper, how often are you the hero? It's so rare, unless you save 2 penalties in a game, or you're a penalty shootout, or whatever it might be. Like, realistically, there's very few. Look at Jordan Pickford at the moment, the amount of stick he gets, and he's England's goalkeeper. Yeah.
Wow,
he gets a lot. So it's tough. Like it is. I stand by it. It's the toughest position on the field. I think you need to be so mentally strong and also you're getting judged by pundits that don't necessarily know goalkeeping. So naturally, it's very easy to dig out a goalkeeper.
I mean, Roy Keane being one of them. I don't know about him, and I mean, him on Pickford alone, he said he was a terrible goalkeeper, which was just I couldn't believe when he said that. But you mentioned Old Trafford, playing at Old Trafford and stuff, because as a fan, when I go to away games especially, I'm always excited to see the stadium and be in there. Is that the same for a player? Do you go to a stadium thinking, oh my God, like this is going to be 80,000 people here?
Yeah, I think it depends. Everyone's different. So like, I think I was always quite nervous before games. So I would go there and I wouldn't necessarily you'd look around. Like, I remember going to St James's Park, going to Old Trafford. Old Trafford in particular, because I did go to a lot of Man United games when I was a kid. So like to go in and actually be stood on the pitch as opposed to sat in the stands and looking around. But it was more for me, it was always at the end of the game. You know, as soon as the final whistle went and it was like, okay, like the job's done for the day. And then you look around and you suddenly realise, wow, there's 60,000 people just watched us, 80,000 people just watched us. You know, so it was more then. I think because I was so focused, so tuned in and wanting to succeed in the game, I probably didn't get those kind of feelings before the game. But yeah, certainly afterwards, and you look back, it's I suppose you're quite proud, I guess.
Yeah. I still watch, of course, Watford in the Championship now, so I'm watching them but I do still watch all Premier League games, whatever I can. I want your opinion on the new handball law and the VAR, because for me personally, VAR I think should either be massively improved or just scrapped from the Premier League. And the new handball rule feels like it's been changed 3 times already this season. So for me personally, if Watford was in the Premier League this season, I don't think, of course I want Watford to be in the Premier League, but I don't think I'd be too happy playing under them circumstances right now. So what's your opinion on both of them?
VAR, yeah. I mean, I just thought it felt like going from 0 to 100, where there's so many things that suddenly fell under the VAR, VAR ruling, where surely you do it a step at a time. It might be you look to perfect offsides first, which they still haven't done seemingly, but it might be that you've seen look to perfect something like that first, and then something. And my biggest problem at the moment with football in general is that there's too many penalties given. Like there's a realization that it's so easy to get a penalty now. It used to be a big thing. I remember, when I started playing, like if a penalty was given against you, I'd go seasons without having a penalty against me. And now all of a sudden it's every other game, literally every other game, a penalty is given, which is just mental. And the problem is the reward for a penalty is too great. So naturally teams, they're not stupid. They'll play for penalties. And that bugs me a bit, because I think that then, it just becomes a very different game. It becomes a bit more robotic in that, if it's then with that kind of mentality and when penalties are being given for everything, that is something that I wish would change. But for VAR, I think it'd just be a case of kind of scaling it back. I like the idea of it, but it needs to be done bit by bit by bit, rather than trying to throw everything in at once. Yeah.
And of course, you might disagree, but you have played against a prime Wayne Rooney and obviously a young Cristiano Ronaldo for Man United. I'm going to guess they're the hardest people you played against, unless I am wrong here.
Yeah, they would be. I mean, I was quite lucky. We played Inter Milan in a friendly. They had some good players at the time, from memory. We played, obviously I was at Blackburn, so I played with some good players there. Played against Man City, but they weren't at their prime at that time. So Ronaldo, of course, would be the one. And
something I wanted to, with goalkeepers, you don't see it that much. Back in your playing days, did you ever get to, was it in your interest to swap shirts with another goalkeeper?
Yeah. No, I got a few. Got Van der Sar, got Shay Gibbon, got Brad Friedel, got Ben Foster, got Lee Grant. Who else did I get? No, I just did, quite a few. I mean, it was always a bit, I don't know, you have to be a bit careful, because Premier League games, you don't normally swap shirts. But I think because there was kind of I don't know, we were so happy to be there, and it was like a bit of a fine balance. Like, I'm playing against Van der Sar. He's been a hero of mine for years and years. So naturally, I'm so keen to get his shirt. But at the same time, I don't want to come across as inferior asking for his shirt. So it was, but no, there was a few that I did manage to get.
As in my watching days, like as from a young child at Watford games, obviously I've seen you live, and then from you I saw Scott Loach, and then it was from Scott Loach, and then in between Scott Loach it was kind of Jonathan Bond as well, and then of course we got Manuel Munia come in, and Aurelio Gomez, Thomas Kuszczak at the club at one point as well, and then we got Ben Foster as our main goalkeeper now, and even our backup keepers. I think Backman, and then Dahlberg, of course, is on loan, and I think all three are very good goalkeepers. Do you think, like, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, maybe even 4 years, do you feel like, because once Ben Foster retires, how do you feel like the standards for being a goalkeeper at Watford is? Because our quality of goalkeeper has been amazing for the last probably decade now.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that you look over, a long time. I find I'd like to see Watford produce goalkeepers again.
Yeah.
That's one thing that, I think it's been a long time since they had a goalkeeper come through and claim the shirts. I'd love to see that. I don't know if that's necessarily likely. I don't know too much about the youth system there at the moment for goalkeepers. But no, look, it'll be big shoes to fill, because I think Ben in particular, the fact that now it's his second stint and he's still doing it at the level that he is, I think that when he leaves, it'll be very difficult, because Ben as well, where Ben did brilliantly was Aurelio Gomez, obviously a huge fan's favourite. So it was going to need someone like Ben to step in to be able to live up to that.
Right.
So, they've got to be very careful with their recruitment for their next goalkeeper, because whoever it is, they're going to start on the back foot and they're going to have to win people over. Kind of like, I've given this example recently, like how it's very difficult for someone like Aaron Ramsdale when you're stepping in for a Dean Henderson who's done so well at Sheffield United. There's going to be similarities where it's whoever steps in, they're going to have to hit the ground running. Otherwise, there's going to be continual comparisons to Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope Watford would sign someone. I mean, personally, especially because I have very high hopes. Of course, I'm optimistic Watford can get back to the Premier League. But for me personally, from the little bits I've seen of Daniel Backman, and he did obviously go on loan to Kilmarnock as well, and I think he had a great season there. I don't think he's that bad. I think he would do a very good job in goal in the Premier League or the Championship anyway. But as you said, like, for me personally, for the youth of Watford, as far as I'm aware, we have a goalkeeper called Adam Parks, we signed from Southampton's youth team. But that's as far as, like, I remember with our goalkeepers now. So, yeah, as you say, it would be very interesting to see, I think, a young goalkeeper come through the ranks and take that number 1 shirt for Watford. But for me, in recent years, I mentioned Amunio, Aurelio Gomez and Ben Foster. We've brought them all in and they've been fantastic, but they've all come in at not an old age, but like a fairly, like, they're probably mid-30s, I'd say.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I would much rather, once Ben has retired, I hope he retires at Watford, then hopefully we can bring someone new in. But from your perspective of a goalkeeper, and you said it's going to be hard for them to fill them boots. Do you think, I mean, personally, when you watch Watford, of course it's not goalkeeping. What do you think this season, or maybe in the Premier League next season, if Watford made it, do you think they could improve on?
That's a good question. I probably need to say that I've seen quite a lot of them this season. Obviously, it's annoying that I can't go and watch them live like I'd like to, but
no.
Hopefully that will change soon enough. But I think that what could they improve? I mean, look, it's easy to talk about individuals and individual areas. I mean, look, I think they've got a squad more than good enough to finish top 2. And I think they've started well enough without necessarily hitting top gear yet. I think it's fair to say. And they've, some of the wins. I don't think they've really clicked into gear fully yet. I do expect them to go up. I think that they retained enough players in order to go up. But look, naturally, I just think that you see it year in, year out. Once they do go up, it's not necessarily about mass recruitment. It's once again just being very clever with the recruitment. Then it might be a couple of players. I think they've got a lot of players that are good enough for the Premier League. It's just making sure that the 3 or 4 lads you do bring in are of top quality, and more so the culture. Just making sure that you're building the correct culture. And lastly, for me, it'd just be having a bit of continuity, I guess, where. I know it's been the way of Watford over the last few years to operate within chaos, but I do think that if you can start to build something that's got a bit of a structure, you've got a game plan which is instructed by the club and not individual managers, and you're not continually changing things, you can actually build something that can sustain. I look at another one of my ex-clubs, Brentford, and I use them. So a great example of a club that has a philosophy and people fit into that philosophy, and they're doing it on a shoestring compared to what Watford do it, and yet are getting huge success and are selling players for millions and millions of pounds. Now, I don't think Watford's a bad setup by any means. I think they've done great over the last 10 years or so on the whole. But I do think a little bit of continuity, having a little bit more of a solid structure to work from. And no reason why Watford can't be a mid-table top 10 Premier League team, given all the parts they have. Yeah.
Of course, you played Premier League and Championship as well. For you, what, apart from the obvious things, what for you really makes a great goalkeeper?
Yeah, there's certain things that you'd say now you have to have. People always touch on height. I don't think height's that important, but I think, certainly you don't see any goalkeepers that are smaller than 6 foot. I think Matty Ryan's the smallest, I think, in the Premier League. So there is an element of that. There's certain biological advantages that you need. So I think, in terms of flexibility, fast twitch fibers, etc. But no, I think a lot of it for me is a certain amount of intelligence, goalkeeping intelligence, being able to read the game. Technique is obviously very important, but it's understanding that technique is only one of several components. So it's the tactical side, the physical side, the nutritional side, the mental side. I think being emotionally stable, emotionally intelligent, I think is key. And then it's understanding the techniques you need to get to the top. So having the variety of distribution needed, being on the front foot when it comes to collecting crosses, shot stopping, your reactions, all this kind of stuff. There's thousands of different attributes that are needed. I think if you get like a young lad or obviously a young lad or girl, but a young lad in particular that's got maybe a lot of the core attributes, and you can put them in the right environment where they're getting the fantastic coaching, they're playing good games that are testing them, then I think that, there's still a big room for improvement in goalkeeping in general. I think even the very, very top goalkeepers, don't get me wrong, they're fantastic. But I think whereas I look at a Ronaldo or a Messi and I wonder whether we're going to see players better than them in 20, 25 years, I certainly think that there's still quite a bit of room for improvement in goalkeeping, which excites me.
Yeah, you do something I would absolutely love to do, which is your work now is still based around football. Your podcast is based around football, and I love all of it. It's something I would love to get into as well. Was that a no-brainer for you after you'd done football? You was always going to be involved in football after?
I always wanted to. I had about a year or so out necessarily, kind of give or take a year that I wasn't massively involved. But no, I love it. I get to work with lads on a day-to-day basis. A lot of the things I always wanted to be able to do, and I haven't necessarily got the structure that I had then. So I'm not, having to report anywhere. I obviously work the hours I want to work. So I'm very lucky. And as I mentioned, goalkeeping's kind of been my passion now for 20, 30 years, God. So, to be able to focus fully on it and have lots of different avenues off it, that was always the dream.
Yeah, well, we are unfortunately out of time. I wish I could discuss football with you for a lot longer. Hopefully we can get the chance soon, but thank you for coming on. I do appreciate your time.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
No worries. Cheers.